Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ravished. I'm Nick.
And I'm Donna.
Episode 6, y'all. We're so thankful for all our loyal listeners who keep tuning in, giving us great feedback. And to all of you first-timers, we hope you enjoy.
Nick, how are you?
Me? I'm super busy. I guess I can say the most memorable thing that happened recently is I had some surgery on my mouth, and I've been recovering, so I've only been able to eat soft foods and stuff. Nothing major, just getting some dental work,
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, all my plants that I love so much look like they're dying because it's so hot here.
Yeah, they're withered.
They're hanging around. But yeah, that's about it for me. Just hot as heck. How have you been?
I'm doing really good. Summer is wrapping up, so we're busy getting ready to go back to school. And trying to stay busy in the kitchen, too. I've been really trying not to eat out as much, even though last night we had pizza. But
Yum.
Yeah. Trying to cook more.
Yeah, that sounds fun. You must get that from me.
I know y'all don't know this, but Nick sends pictures of herself cooking dinner and videos every single day to our sister group chat.
I do. I'm guilty of that. I'm so proud of it. I love cooking.
But the other day, I have to give props to, the mister, because he made literally one of the most delicious meals we've ever had at home.
What was it?
So it was this salmon with this incredible cream and spinach sauce, and he even used wine. So I was like,
Ew.
Dang, we're fancy. Who cooks with wine?
That's really gourmet. And yes, wine makes everything fancy in cooking, makes everything taste better. All kinds of cooking wine or real wine.
Yeah.
But that sounds so good. He's got to share the recipe.
I already told a few people that he'll cook it for them when they come over, and I didn't ask him first.
That's awesome. A man that can cook, that's very rare. Just kidding.
Yeah, who can cook well. I think that's the rare part. All right. So let's get into it. This week,
Okay.
I decided to go back to my roots in the genre I love most when reading. Regency Romance. Yay!
Yay.
I know, it's definitely not Nick's favorite, y'all. If you remember the first episode, how she felt I wasted her time.
No, I did not. I was just sad you wasted yours. No. But no, I like Regency Romance. I really do. And I hope this read was better for you.
Oh, it definitely was. And I actually took a cue from you on where I went to find this book.
Oh, I'm so flattered. You want to be like me. Where'd you go?
Sometimes you're all right, I guess. I actually went to my local library because I love everything free.
Me too.
Yes. And the book I chose this week was The Wife Trap. It's the second book in the Trap trilogy written by Tracy Ann Warren. Oh my gosh, that was a lot of T's.
It was. That must have been hard.
I actually read the first book, The Husband Trap, and then I read this one immediately after and decided I didn't really enjoy the first book very much because the character development and who the main female character ended up being in the end, I was like, you're lame. I didn't feel like we could do an episode about her. It was not inspiring. But the second book was a huge improvement, in my opinion. And what's kind of unique about this trilogy is the entire trilogy was written I'm sorry, not written, but published in 2006. So that's pretty awesome because typically you think it takes a couple years to close out a series, but not in this case.
Yeah, longer, maybe even than a couple of years. I mean, I don't know if I've ever heard of a whole series of books like being published in 1 year. I mean, that's wild. But just to say, I like the titles. I love the titles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they're
it
all...
trapped me.
Yeah. Yeah, and you don't have to wait to find out what happens next, pretty much. The books were all available, even though I didn't read them, 15 years ago. But I could have if I wanted to.
You could have, Donna.
So the author, Tracy Ann Warren, actually said this about the Trap trilogy. The Trap books are tied together by family hijinks, duty and deceptions, with lots of fun and laughter added in. So that's her description of the entire series, and after reading 2 of the books, I definitely think that's an accurate depiction of the world that she created so far.
Yeah, I like that description. It's to the point, and it's lots of fun and laughter. Duty and deception sounds interesting, but okay, I have 2-part questions. Number 1, what is a family hijinks? And number 2, you already read 2 of the 3 books. Oh, you already said you didn't read the 3rd one yet. Never mind.
So family hijinks are pretty much all the trickery they do and hide from one another, and you'll see it a little later when I get into the actual description. And unfortunately, I haven't read the 3rd book because my library doesn't have it. So that's sad.
Gotcha. I wonder why.
Yeah, I keep going back to check. Maybe someone has it checked out, but nope, don't have it. And then what the worst part, in my opinion, is all the reviews say that the 3rd book is the absolute best of the entire series.
Oh, man. You got to find that book. And you know what? To all the readers out there, if you don't know, I do know this about my public library, which where I live, there's several of them in the area. But you can actually request books for them to purchase or find or buy, I'm pretty sure. So that's something you might want to check out.
Oh, that's a good idea. I didn't think about that.
Yeah. So who do you think would be a fan of this book?
If you're into Regency Romance that's really not super heavy on the drama, I think you'd enjoy this book. It doesn't take the characters too seriously, and it's not like depressing or dark, in my opinion. It's a light read, I guess, and I liked that because it wasn't so much where the first Regency book we discussed in the first episode, I was like forcing myself to go back to it because it was weighing me down, but this was super easy to read. I liked it.
Yeah, well, that sounds interesting. I mean, but sometimes too much drama can be draining, even if it's like isn't happening to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that first book was super heavy. This seems more lighthearted and easier to read.
Yeah, it wasn't like super serious and, all the craziness that happened in that other book I read wasn't, exactly what we just said 20 times. Okay, so here's,
Gotcha.
Here's the book description. Let me swallow. Your presence is requested at a wedding deception. After orchestrating a scandalous high society ruse, Lady Jeanette Brantford is banished from her family's estate in England and sent to live with boring elderly cousins in the Irish countryside. But Jeanette's exile is surprisingly eventful. En route to her dreadful destination, she encounters Derek O'Brien, a devilishly handsome architect who transforms Jeanette's punishment into a delicious whirlwind of wits, words, and undeniable passion. Although no less than a duke could satisfy a lady of her status, Jeanette is unable to extinguish the burning desire she has for Derek's smoldering looks and sizzling kisses. Little does she know, her dashing Irishman is no commoner. He's the 11th Earl of Mulholland, and he's thoroughly enjoying the irresistible game of hard to get. But before he reveals his true identity, a little temptation and trickery are in order to teach his fair lady a lesson or two about love. So, what do you think? Is it something you might choose to read?
I think so. I think I'd open this book and start reading it. And that little ruse of her, you know, and she doesn't even know he's an earl, and sounds, you know,
and
really
good. And it's, you know, the flirtation game is so fun when you're first dating. The days. Where it's just, they're really funny events that they do to each other, going back and forth to mess around with one another. And then I think he really, in the end, is trying to hide who he is because he wants her to actually love him and not,
Right.
This is a good stepping stone for who or the power and money I want to have and title or whatever.
Right, like a challenge.
Yeah, he wants her to actually care about him.
Yeah.
All right.
Good.
The setting is 1812. I'm sorry. Oh my gosh. The setting is 1817 in Ireland. The main female character, as we said, is Jeanette Branford, a 2-time season incomparable in London. She's absolutely gorgeous with sea blue eyes and dazzling smile that many times in the book is referred to as a light and glow that enchants any man who looks upon it.
Wow. That's, wait, what is an incomparable?
So she's pretty much the woman every woman wants to be and every man wants to be with.
Okay, I'm with you. Gotcha.
Yeah, and in the first book, so I'm going to kind of go back and forth and tell you some of what happened in the first book. So in the first book of the trilogy, she's introduced and she's so extremely unlikable and she's essentially a bully. She forces her identical twin sister to take her place at her wedding, literally right before the wedding begins. And throughout the story, her sister pretends to be Jeanette almost the whole book. And it's insane.
Wait, she has her twin sister change place with her right before walking down the aisle with her husband, and her sister actually agrees to it?
Yes, almost the entire book. So she was engaged to a duke, and then her sister ended up being the one who walked down the aisle. But that's, you know, part of
weird.
the family hijinks I referred to earlier.
Oh, okay. Yep, that would fit right into that. That's a lot.
Yeah, and I wasn't really enjoying her sister as a character. She is pretty pitiful at the, you know, once you digest the entire book. She didn't like herself at all, and she even enjoyed pretending to be her sister. So her twin enjoyed pretending to be Jeanette, and it was weird, and that's why I like the second book better, because the female character, she was more herself, and she loved herself. It wasn't like self-pity and all that. She's stronger female lead, I guess, and I like that better.
Isn't it the same character, though, in the second book? The same female?
No, so her
wasn't.
twin sister in the first book, I didn't like her because she wasn't a very strong lead in the first book. She was who the book was actually about. Does that make sense?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So her sister's name is Janet, or Violet is her nickname. But Violet was the main character in the first book, The Husband Trap, and she didn't really care for herself. She was very timid and enjoyed pretending to be Jeanette with the...
Yeah, so Jeanette was going to get married to the
Duke.
Yeah.
And she ran out. But, yeah.
She's back.
Yes, and I think that's what made me want to read the book. But yeah, you start this book with the thought, how can they make Jeanette a likable character because she was such a brat in the first one, and I think that's really what pushed me to want to read the book, because I was intrigued. Like, how could they make her the lead of a book when they made her kind of not a super bad guy, but one of the main bad people in the last book, you know?
Yeah, I'm not loving her description so far, but maybe she's going to have some redemption.
Yes. And so at the end of the first book, the Duke, Jeanette's ex-fiance, announces to everyone in London that he actually married Jeanette's twin, Violet, and this pretty much disgraces Jeanette because everyone can see, like, well, where has she been this whole time? You know,
right.
And reputation was everything. So her parents are extremely humiliated, and they literally had never said an unkind thing to her, and they spoiled her. She was their favorite. But they packed her up and sent her to Ireland to Wilda and Cuthbert, her distant relatives. They're old and live in the country and do absolutely no entertaining, which is what Jeanette lives for. So she's what one would call a society queen and loves the whole event of getting ready and dolled up for people to look at her. You know, it kind of reminds me of someone in this podcast.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, it's definitely not me.
Okay. I'll admit it. But,
always dolled up.
She... It's fun. But, so she, really has something coming to her that she's not going to like.
Yes. The ultimate punishment for her. So Wilda and Cuthbert, you know, wake up at 6:30 in the morning or earlier, which is the worst imaginable thing to Jeanette and my 14-year-old, and she struggles, to say the least. Throughout the book, you can definitely see her mature, though, and stop only thinking about herself and things that matter to her. And,
Good.
yeah, there's quite a few moments where she's obnoxious and ridiculous, but I blame her parents. They raised her and allowed her to be that way. So it wasn't going to happen overnight that she would change.
Right. I mean, when you let a child growing up allowed to be, you know, feeling so entitled or treat people like she treated others, I mean...
Yeah.
Only them to blame.
And, I mean, she treated her identical twin, of all people, like she didn't matter. But, like I said, you do get to see her grow up throughout the book, and she really, unfortunately, has that typical English aristocratic mindset, like snobby. She thinks she's better than other people, and she has to, in her mind, end up with someone in the nobility, like a duke or just someone with a super high title and money, because that's what matters in her world.
Right. Yep, that's materialistic and that doesn't last. So,
Yeah.
All right, well, tell me about the hunk.
Your favorite part. So, ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you Derek O'Brien, Earl of Mulholland. Are you ready for this description?
Yep, tell me about the man.
He is tall, dark, and yes, very handsome.
Is there any other kind? I mean, come on.
Not very often. He's Irish with dark brown hair and dark blue, almost navy eyes, and a body that shows he's not afraid of hard labor. Wink, wink.
Ooh, I can see him now, but I thought he'd have red hair.
Nope. Yeah, and unfortunately, the time period of the book is when the English and Irish didn't trust or like one another. The English thought they were better breeding than Irish people and really stuck up their noses. And thankfully, Jeanette didn't have this attitude, but it is seen throughout the book and from some of the supporting characters where they kind of treat some of the Irish differently.
That's so stupid.
I
don't
agree.
Like that.
So dumb.
was what it was.
Yep. Thankfully, we've moved on. So Derek is one of 8 or 9 children, and he inherited his title, but he finds out the estate is completely broken in shambles. So he decided he didn't care for the traditional laziness other members of the aristocracy lived by, where they literally don't believe a man with a title should work for his money because it was beneath him. And Derek went and became an architect, and he became extremely successful and built his estate back up, and he's like super rich now.
Sounds like he had a lot of drive and dedication, and sounds like he comes from like a real, very different type of background than Jeanette does. Am I right?
100%. He doesn't believe in letting status control his perception of people, and he's very kind to everyone. He's also thoughtful and admits when he's wrong about things, like, oh my goodness. So in a scene I'm going to tell you about, one of her dresses gets ruined, and he tries to replace it with another dress, which is highly inappropriate, but it was, very thoughtful and a gesture of goodwill. So he's, like, very likable. And he's from the middle of nowhere, Ireland, and doesn't have a lot in common with Jeanette, who's from bustling London, besides their electric chemistry. He has a lot of patience throughout the book, and he can see that she has a lot of potential to be a really great person. So he's just perfect,
Sounds like it. So who's the villain?
Our villain is a man named Toddy Markham. He's a familiar name from the first book in the series, where he's actually found out to have taken Jeanette's virginity, and then he ditched her for a richer woman. So
oh gosh,
he gets her to, like, leave the Duke pretty much, and that's why she switched places with her twin, because she's in love with Toddy. But once they get to be together, he ditches her because he didn't know she wasn't super rich.
Oh,
yeah, ridiculous. And he doesn't really show up until almost the very end of the book. And he is such a creep that it didn't seem believable, some of the things he was doing so, like, boldly in front of Derek. But I kind of felt it was unnecessary how he just barged in. He didn't need to become a part of the book. There were enough events happening where there was enough drama, and it's probably the least favorite part of the book for me, was because it didn't need to be there.
You just didn't like it. You don't like the villain.
No, it was like such a small part of the book that it was like, did this even need to be here? You know what I mean? They already had some
unnecessary,
yeah, it was quick and weird how it was just, he literally just showed up.
Throw it in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder why authors do that.
I know. I get adding more drama, but it already had other issues, like I said, which would have made the book still exciting and good. But, yeah. Get it together.
Get it together, man.
Yes. So with that brief lesson on our characters, let me tell you about the beginning of the book. Jeanette, picture it, is riding in her coach, crying her eyes out, because she's, in Ireland, far away from everything she loves and knows. She's going to the woods, basically.
Right. These two hags.
Yeah. The man she thought she loved and caused the scandal for, gave herself to, he ditched her. Like, she was nothing, and she just felt really stupid for believing him and his lies, and then her parents had no sympathy for her, and no one tried to understand her perspective. So she's pretty upset.
I mean, I don't blame them.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I'd be very upset, and my daughter, too, if she did something so foolish,
Yeah, it was a big deal.
Figure it out. Right.
And if that isn't bad enough, of course, she's riding in this carriage, and it gets stuck in a huge, mud hole. And she refuses, her dainty self, to get out of the coach. So while the coachman and servants and her maid are trying to help push this carriage out of the mud, she's sitting in the coach, you know, pitying herself for being seasick because they keep pushing it back and forth so her stomach hurts. But all of a sudden, up pops Derek in the window, and she actually is like, oh my gosh, he's trying to rob me. Because she doesn't know who this guy is, so she's like, he's really hot, but what do you want? Like, I'll shoot you. And he's like, no, actually, you need to get your big butt out of this carriage so we have less weight to push to try and get it out of the mud. You know, like, stop being selfish.
Yeah.
And she, obviously, like the description said, she doesn't know who he is. He's just a commoner to her, and she's extremely offended.
Well, I'm sure that didn't go over too well.
Yes. She, you know, looks at him, and she just is thinking, he is fine. But she's upset that he commented on her weight. But while the servants and Derek...
Oh, he actually said that?
Well, because he
I
was
thought
like...
you just added that in.
No, because he was like, you know, it would be a lot easier if you got out because you're adding so much weight to the carriage. And she was
oh my God,
very offended. She's not described as a bigger lady. It's just, you know, every pound counts when you're pushing this huge wooden thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And how dare somebody ask her to get out
I know.
with her big booty.
So while she's standing on the side of the road waiting for them to push the coach out of the mud, Jeanette won't stop complaining. So she goes up and she's like, I'm getting sunburnt. And while she's complaining, because he kind of dismisses her, of course, this huge stream of mud splashes all over her, and it ruins her favorite traveling gown. And that's, yeah, you know, the icing on the cake for her and the situation she's in, and the tears just fall the rest of the trip to her cousin's home. Like, she's very upset.
Oh my God, boo-hoo. Yeah, I mean, sounds like a pretty rough day for her. Like, she's somebody who's used to be being catered to and her every whim, you know.
Yeah.
Princess.
Not ever in the mud.
Right. So, I mean, I'm sure she never expected in, what, a million years to see this man again, like, who she met on the side of the road. How do they see each other again if her cousins are homebodies?
Well, they literally never leave the house the entire book, but good question. So, Derek is an architect, and he actually is working on this huge renovation on Jeanette's cousin's home because part of their house had burnt down recently. So, Jeanette is outside, bored as all get out, you know, because there's literally nothing going on. And all of a sudden, this huge dog runs up and knocks her over and starts just licking her. And who, to her surprise, does this giant wolfhound belong? None other than Derek. And from then on, they continue to pester and, like, tease each other and do all these kind of little games going back and forth with one another to keep messing with each other. Because obviously, you know, they're attracted to each other.
Oh, yeah, that sounds lovely. And that's one way to flirt.
Yeah, so just back and forth, fun, messing with one another, like I said, and their relationship grows from there. Whose didn't, you know? And, yeah, that's all I have for the description. I don't like giving away a ton of the book's content, but what do you think?
I think it sounds charming, you know? I mean, their relationship and her being so different from him and Miss Hoity-Toity and him being this, like, good-hearted, you know, with a man with a great title and, you know, a great work drive and stuff. And so I hope it has a good ending. But
Yeah.
It sounds, you know, it sounds nice. And
It does. But I agree. I think it was a decent book. I liked it better than, like I said, the first book in the trilogy, because Violet was so insecure and didn't love herself at all, and I just don't like those kind of people. I'm sorry. Like, I know we all have insecurities, but it was a lot of insecurities for her. And Jeanette, wasn't completely likable, and some of her reactions to situations were immature. But overall, I really liked their story, and I loved Derek a lot.
Yeah, I like him too. So, okay, how did the book make you feel when you finished it?
I felt good. Like I said earlier, it wasn't a heavy read, so I wasn't drained or sad, like needing to pause or anything because it was getting too heavy. But it was pretty good until that last part where it kind of went off the rails with Toddy.
Yeah, I mean, the endings are the most important part. You got to get those right. So, did the story seem believable?
I think her growth as a person was more relatable than what I read in the first book. I mean, when you get into a serious relationship, you and your partner do change and grow as people, and I think it was believable. They'd be so different, yet pulled to one another,
Right. And this book was called The
Wife Trap.
Wife Trap, right? Yes. So, I get it, and I like it.
Yes.
So, what do you rate it out of 5 stars?
Amazon rated 4.4 stars, and I give it 3.5 stars. It was a good read, but like I said, the ending where they threw in a villain was not really going with the flow of the rest of the book, and I think how it was wrapped up could have been different, but it was still a good book. I enjoyed reading it.
Yeah, and you know what? I think the 3rd book would answer a lot of those questions, and maybe the villain will be in there too. I don't know.
I hope not. I can't stand him.
He will. He will.
Do you think you would read this book?
Well, yeah, I think I would read it. I would definitely try to get into it, and but I do like heavy books. Not too much drama, obviously, but I like those tears of joy, flowing, and I mean, but I definitely give it a whirl.
Yeah, I think it was easier also because it wasn't a book on my phone, which I usually read. It was like a handheld book, a real one. So that made it easier, too.
Yeah, they're the best. Old-fashioned, but
they work really well. So why don't you tell us?
That's all I do.
Why don't you tell us what you have in store for us in the next? Oh my goodness! Okay, hold on.
Bleh.
Why don't you tell us what you have in store for us in our next episode?
Do you want to know the title, or do you just want me to give a little blurby?
I think the title's fine.
I am going to say this. The book has something about it that's similar to the last book that I reviewed, called Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers. And the title is called The Lady's Mine.
The Lady is Mine. I have never heard of it. But I do know how much you loved Redeeming Love, and you were so infatuated with it. So I'm excited. I hope you're enjoying this book so far.
Oh, yes. That was episode 2. This is going to be episode 7 and Lucky 7. But it was the best book I ever read in my life. So I'm just expecting this one to be better or, even better.
Yeah.
I'm so excited.
It only goes up from here.
Exactly.
All right, everyone. Well, that concludes our review of The Wife Trap. Thanks for listening. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter @RavishedPodcast.
Yes, and be sure to rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. If you take a selfie listening to the episode, we'd be more than happy to share and retweet it, tagging you.
Bye.
Bye.